My name is Emily Carson. I'm 27 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been treated like a stranger in my own family. Not because I did something wrong, but because I wasn't who they wanted me to be. I was the quiet one. The stiff, odd one. The girl who fixed her own car instead of asking for help. Who preferred books over brunches. Who didn't wear designer or marry for status. To my father. That meant one thing, failure. My dad, Richard Carson, was the kind of man who believed image was everything. A real estate developer with sharp suits, louder opinions, and a temper that flared like gasoline near a match. He always favored my older brother, Daniel, tall, charming, and perfectly molded in his image. My sister, Lila, too elegant, polished, a mirror of my mother's socialite world. And then there was me. The black sheep. Those words haunted me like a shadow. But nothing prepared me for the day he said them out loud. In front of everyone. Loud enough to silence the clinking of champagne glasses and freeze conversations. Mid-sentence. It happened at our annual family gathering, an event hosted at my parents' estate every spring. Dozens of people. Extended family. Investors. Colleagues. A perfectly curated guest list that reminded everyone just how high the Carson family stood in society. That day, I wore a simple navy dress, nothing extravagant. I had even done my hair. The way my mom liked, soft curls pinned back neatly. I'd made an effort. A genuine one, but effort didn't matter to people who had already decided you didn't belong. I remember holding a glass of sparkling water and standing near the garden. When my father stepped up to make a speech, he raised his hand, smiled wide for the cameras, and began his usual self-congratulatory speech about legacy and vision and Carson values. Then, out of nowhere, he turned to me, and as for Emily, he said, tone turning, Sour, the so-called artist of the family, if you can call sketching in coffee shops a profession. I felt the blood drain from my face. He chuckled, actually chuckled, and added, there's one in every family, right? The black sheep, the one who never quite fits in, who refuses to live up to the name. That's our Emily. I froze. Leela laughed. Daniel looked away. The guest tensed but didn't speak. And then he said it. You'll always be a nobody. The words were like knife sharp, deliberate, and meant to humiliate. He hadn't just insulted me. He'd erased me, publicly, as if I was the stain on his perfect reputation. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, lips pressed shut, eyes burning, until someone behind him pushed their chair back. Uncle Mark. The only person in our family who ever treated me like a person instead of a disappointment. He stood up slowly, calmly, his face unreadable. If that's true, he said, voice deep and clear, then explain this, Richard. The garden went silent. You could have heard a leaf fall. My father blinked. What the hell are you talking about? Uncle Mark pulled out a folded document from his jacket pocket. It looked old, yellowed at the edges, but still crisp. Then he stepped forward and laid it flat on the table in front of everyone. You always said she's a nobody, he said. But you forgot something. You forgot what she did for you when no one else would. I frowned. What was he talking about? Even my mother leaned forward, clearly confused. Uncle Mark continued, this is a contract, signed 3 years ago. When your business was in trouble. When banks started backing out. And you were too proud to ask your partners for help. My father's eyes narrowed. That's irrelevant, it's not, Mark interrupted. Because Emily co-signed that emergency bridge loan. With her savings. With everything she had, that's the only reason your company survived long enough to get that merger deal. She saved your legacy. My breath caught. The room erupted in murmurs. People turned to look at me with widened eyes. My brother's mouth fell open. My mother looked like she'd just seen a ghost, but my father, he went pale, dead silent. I hadn't told anyone. I had done it quietly, discreetly, and made him promise never to mention it. At the time, I thought he was embarrassed. I thought maybe I'd finally earned a shred of respect, but he hadn't mentioned it because he never intended to. He wanted to keep the illusion alive. That I was nothing. That I was beneath them. And now the truth was out. Uncle Mark wasn't done. Not only that, he said, voice shaking now, but she refused to take a dime back when the company recovered. She said, and I quote, I'm not doing this for approval. I'm doing it because it's right. A lump rose in my throat. I remembered that moment. That cold December night, walking out of the bank with trembling hands and annoying fear that I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. But I did it anyway. For him, and he still called me a nobody. Suddenly, I wasn't the one standing alone anymore. Eyes turned to him, judging, questioning, and for once he had no words. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but all he managed was a single breath. I met his eyes. This time, I was the one who smiled. My father didn't say a word. He simply stood there as if someone had pulled the ground from beneath his perfectly polished shoes. For a man who always had something to say, something to prove, he looked shockingly small. The guests stared. Whispering in confusion, no one reached for another glass. No one tried to pretend like the moment hadn't happened, and I just stood there. I should have been angry. I should have stormed out, thrown that glass of sparkling water across the marble patio, and screamed until my voice gave out. But I didn't, because something deeper was happening inside me. Something quiet, powerful. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the outsider. He did. Uncle Mark turned toward me and gave a small nod as if to say, "You don't need to hide anymore." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is it true?" I asked my father. "Are you really that ashamed of me?" Even after what I did, he opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His face was flushed now, not from anger, but from shame. My mother slowly reached for his arm, whispering something into his ear, but he didn't respond. Lila scoffed behind me. "Okay, can we not make this a soap opera? She gave you a loan, big deal. That doesn't mean she's not still, you know?" I turned to her. "Still what, Lila?" She shrugged, twirling her wine glass like she was at a fashion event instead of a family reckoning. "Still weird. I mean, who even draws for a living?" The comment stung, but not because it was new. It was the same thing I'd heard all my life. The same way they brushed off everything I did that didn't fit into their world. But now, with the truth out there, truth unraveling, her words felt shallow, just like her. Uncle Mark turned on her sharply. "You want to talk about weird? Lila, do you want me to pull up your tuition records? Remind everyone here how many times Emily helped your mother cover your credit card debt behind the scenes?" Lila's eyes went wide. "That's a lie." "Oh no, it's not," Mark said, suddenly louder. "Emily has been bailing this family out for years, quietly, without complaint. And what does she get in return? Mockery, public humiliation. Enough." My father barked suddenly, voice hoarse, but no one flinched. No one looked impressed by his authority anymore. Uncle Mark didn't back down. "No, Richard, it's not enough. You made a fool out of her in front of all these people. People who wouldn't even be here if she hadn't saved your precious company. You call her the black sheep? Then maybe it's time we all take a look at what the rest of the herd has been doing." The silence that followed was like thunder. Heavy, unavoidable. A guest near the back, Mr. Patterson, one of my dad's longtime investors, finally stepped forward and cleared his throat. "I remember that quarter," he said. "The books looked too clean. I asked about the sudden turnaround, but your CFO gave me some vague speech about anonymous investors. So that was Emily?" My father didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth hung in the air like perfume, sharp and undeniable. Took a shaky breath and finally stepped away from the stone railing that lined the garden. "I never wanted recognition," I said quietly. "I never asked for thanks, but I guess I hoped. Maybe one day you'd look at me and not see a failure." My father's expression changed just slightly, like he wanted to say something that would fix everything but didn't know where to begin. That's when I realized he didn't have the words. Because to apologize would mean admitting he'd been wrong all along. "And Richard Carson didn't do that. Ever. You always said I didn't belong," I continued, my voice gaining strength now. "You said I'd never amount to anything, that I was the disappointment. But I'm not the one hiding behind lies and fake smiles." The wind shifted. A few leaves rustled near the garden path. I stepped closer, not to intimidate him, but to make sure he looked me in the eyes when I said what needed to be said. "You built a house," I said, "but you never built a home. You raised kids to be reflections of you, not people. You taught us to pretend, not to feel, and for years I thought it was me who was broken." My father's eyes finally met mine, and in them I didn't see hatred. I didn't even see anger, I saw fear, because deep down, he knew what everyone else in that garden was beginning to realize. He was the one who had failed, not me. I'm not going to keep proving myself to you, I said, stepping back. I'm not going to stand quietly and let you humiliate me anymore. That girl you pushed down her whole life, she's gone. Uncle Mark gave a soft clap. Then others joined, slowly, hesitantly, but they did applause, not thunderous. Not theatrical, but real, respectful, and in that moment something inside me healed. I turned to leave. I didn't need to stay for the rest of the party. I didn't need to watch my father scramble to patch his reputation. I'd done what I came to do, and this time, I wasn't walking away in shame. I was walking away with my head high, because I had nothing left to prove. I didn't make it far before someone called out my name. Emily, wait. It wasn't my father, it wasn't my mother, it was Daniel, my older brother, the golden child of the Carson legacy. The man who never missed a photo opportunity, whose suits always fit like they were custom-made, and they were. He had always been the picture of success. The one everyone compared me to. Why can't you be more like Daniel? That line had followed me like a ghost. Now here he was, jogging a few steps to catch up with me, his perfect composure slightly. Cracked, I turned around slowly, cautious. His eyes searched mine, but I didn't say anything. I wanted to know why he had stopped me. Was it damage control? Guilt? Or something else? I didn't know, he said quietly, almost breathless. About the loan, about any of it. I gave him a small, unreadable smile. You never asked. His shoulders dropped at that. You're right. I didn't. I was too caught up in Dad's world. In trying to please him. You did a great job, I said, a little more sharply than I intended. You turned out just like him. That hit him harder than I thought it would. His face twitched like the words pierced deeper than expected. I didn't mean to be blind to it, I just thought, if I followed the path he laid out, things would be fine, safe, controlled. I didn't realize how much of yourself you had to erase just to be in the same room. I folded my arms, unsure if I should soften or stand my ground. And now that you realize it? I asked. What are you going to do with that? He hesitated. I don't know yet, but I want to make it right. If there's a way, I raised an eyebrow. You think an apology is enough to undo 27 years of being treated like background noise? No, he said immediately. I don't, but maybe it's a start. The sincerity in his voice gave me pause. For all his privilege and power, Daniel had never truly seen me. Not as a full human being. Not until today. Maybe now, with the illusion shattered, we could finally speak as equals. Maybe. Time will tell, I said, brushing past him. But I'm not waiting around for anyone to catch up, not anymore. And I meant it. I left the estate without looking back. The moment I stepped out of that suffocating garden and into the car, I finally let out the breath I didn't know. I've been holding. My hands were still trembling when I pulled into my apartment parking lot. The sun was lower now, casting long orange streaks across the pavement, and the air smelled like early spring rain. My apartment was small, modest, but it was mine. My art was everywhere, framed sketches on the walls, a canvas on the easel by the window, pencils tucked into old coffee mugs. It didn't sparkle like my father's mansion, but it felt like home. I changed out of my dress, tied my hair up, and curled into the worn-out chair by the window. I stared out at the sky, letting the silence settle. But just as I was starting to feel peace trickle back into my chest, my phone buzzed. Dad. I stared at the screen like it had caught fire. He never called me, never texted. If he needed something, he sent a message through Mom or Daniel. He barely acknowledged I had a phone number. A part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, the part that still hoped for answers, tapped accept. Emily, he said, his voice low and rough. I owe you an explanation. I didn't reply. He cleared his throat. I didn't plan to say those things today. It just came out. Do you always accidentally humiliate people? I asked, my voice flat, silence. I was trying to protect the family image. He finally said. I actually laughed, bitterly. By tearing me down? In front of everyone? I didn't think anyone would care, that's the problem. I snapped, sitting upright. You didn't think I mattered enough for anyone to care. You thought you could say whatever you wanted and no one would stop you. Emily, no, let me finish. I stood, pacing now, the fire building in my chest. I helped you. I saved your company. I didn't do it for applause. I did it because I thought, maybe, just maybe, you'd see me differently. That you'd finally look at me and not feel embarrassed. A long pause. I did see you differently, he said quietly. That's what scared me. I stopped pacing. What? You were stronger than me. Smarter than I gave you credit for. Independent. And that scared me, because I couldn't control you. I couldn't shape you into what I wanted. So I dismissed. You. The words hit me like a slap, more painful because they were honest. At least he was finally admitting it. Emily? I know I can't fix what I broke, he added, but I hope one day you'll forgive me. I didn't answer, because I didn't know if I could. Forgiveness wasn't a button you pushed, it was a process. And he was 27 years late. I don't hate you, I said quietly. But I don't need you anymore either. That seemed to shake him. I hope you find peace with that, I added, then hung up before he could say anything else. That night I stayed up sketching. Not for a client. Not for anyone else, just for me. I drew my father, not the man in the suit, but the broken one I'd seen today. The one who had built an empire on power but didn't know what to do when love didn't come with conditions. The one who had no idea how to face a daughter who no longer needed his approval. And beside him, I drew myself. Not the black sheep, not the disappointment. Just a woman finally standing in her own light. And for the first time in my life, I felt whole. Asterisk. The next morning, sunlight poured into my small apartment, warming the wooden floors and casting long golden streaks across my sketchbook. I woke up earlier than usual, despite barely sleeping. My mind had been buzzing all night with memories, regrets, and fragments of that conversation with my father. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, still unsure what to make of his call. He sounded sincere, vulnerable even. But part of me couldn't shake the doubt. Was it guilt or damage control? The public fallout from yesterday's scene had already begun. My phone buzzed with messages from relatives, old acquaintances, even a few of my father's business partners. Most were saying things like, I had no idea what you did for your father. It was extraordinary. You've always been the strong one, Emily. It was overwhelming. Some messages made me smile, others made me want to cry. But none mattered more than the knock that came at noon. 3 soft knocks. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door slowly and there stood Uncle Mark, holding a bag of pastries in one hand and a folder under his arm. I figured you didn't eat last night, he said with a familiar warmth in his voice. Mind if I come in? Of course not, I said quickly, stepping aside. You didn't have to bring anything. Old habit, he chuckled as he entered. Comfort food for heavy conversations. He settled into the chair across from me, placing the folder between us. His eyes scanned the apartment before landing on the sketches pinned to my walls. You've built a life here, he said, one that feels real. I nodded, unsure what to say. Then he slid the folder forward. I need to show you something. Something your father never wanted you to see. I blinked. What is it? Mark leaned in, his tone shifting. This is a shareholder agreement, one your grandfather drafted before he passed. It outlines a contingency plan specifically naming you as the primary successor to the Carson estate in the event that Richard was deemed unfit to lead. I stared at the paper, stunned. What are you talking about? Your grandfather saw how your father treated people, he said. He believed leadership meant character, not just money. He always said you had something your father didn't heart. My breath caught in my throat, but Grandpa never said anything to me. He wanted you to earn it on your own terms, Mark replied, and you did, without even knowing it. He opened the folder and pointed to a section highlighted in yellow. Clause 12C. If the primary successor, Richard Carson, exhibits unethical behavior that jeopardizes the reputation of the Carson estate or the well-being of direct descendants, control shall be reassessed by the board. He looked up. That moment in the garden yesterday? It triggered this clause. Investors are talking. Board members are furious. The press already got wind of it. My stomach turned. I didn't want this to blow up like that. But it needed to, he said firmly. The truth always comes out. Now the board wants to meet with you. They're considering transferring voting rights and majority control of the trust to you, at least temporarily. I felt like I was dreaming. Me? But I'm not even involved in the company anymore. Maybe it's time you were, he said, his voice calm but firm. Maybe it's time you take back what's yours. Not just for revenge, but to finally shape it into something better. My hands trembled slightly as I touched the folder. I'd spent so long being invisible that the idea of holding real power felt surreal. You're not obligated, he added. But I thought you deserved the choice. I sat in silence for a long moment, then I nodded slowly. I want to go to that meeting. 2 days later, I walked into a boardroom I'd only ever seen from the sidelines. It was a high-rise downtown. Glass walls, gleaming floors. The smell of polished wood and stale coffee. A room where every decision had been made without me until now. 12 people sat at the long table. All powerful. All older. And every single one of them turned when I entered. Uncle Mark walked beside me, calm as ever. You don't have to say much, he whispered. Just be yourself. The chairman of the board, a stern-faced woman named Margaret Lane, rose and extended her hand. Miss Carson, she said. Thank you for coming. I shook her hand, surprised by the genuine respect in her voice. She gestured to a chair. We've reviewed the incident footage, investor complaints, and Mark submitted documents. Would you like to make a statement before we deliberate? I paused, then nodded. I stood slowly and faced the room. My name is Emily Carson. I began, steady but honest. For most of my life, I was made to feel like I didn't belong here, that I didn't matter. That being different meant being worthless. But I've learned something important. Sometimes the strongest leaders are the ones no one sees coming. I let that sit. Your legacy isn't just numbers on a balance sheet. It's how you treat people when no one's watching. I never asked to inherit anything, but I won't stand by while the Carson name becomes synonymous with cruelty, arrogance, and shame. If I take this responsibility, I won't do it for status. I'll do it to rebuild trust. I looked each board member in the eye, and if that's not what you're looking for, then don't vote for me. Silence. Then Margaret nodded. We'll take this to vote. Please step outside. Uncle Mark and I waited in the lounge. The air was heavy with uncertainty. I tried not to fidget, but my heart was racing. 20 minutes later, the door opened. Margaret stepped out, holding a single piece of paper. Effective immediately, she said. The Carson Trust will transfer majority voting power to Emily Carson under temporary executive guidance. I didn't speak because I couldn't, for the first time in my life. I had won. Not by fighting dirty, but by standing in my truth. The city skyline shimmered, beyond the glass walls of the boardroom. As I stood in my new role. Temporary or not, I was now the one holding the reins of the Carson legacy. Not because of family name. Not because someone handed it to me out of pity. But because I earned it. Uncle Mark placed a warm hand on my shoulder. You did it, Emily. I looked up at him. I didn't think it would feel like this. Like what? Not like revenge, more like release. He smiled, and for the first time in weeks, so did I, a genuine, full smile. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings, transition planning, press statements, and overwhelming attention. My phone buzzed nonstop. Journalists wanted interviews. The media had picked up the story of the Carson family power shift, as they called it, but I didn't care about the headlines. What mattered most was what came next, and that began with a decision. I requested a full staff meeting at Carson and Co-headquarters. I wanted to speak directly to the people behind the curtains, the workers who never got to sit at the table, but kept the lights on. On the morning of the meeting, I walked into the main conference hall wearing a simple navy blue suit. No flashy brands, no designer heels. Just me. They didn't know what to expect. Maybe another Carson acting like royalty. But I wasn't there to perform. I stepped up to the mic. My voice shook at first, but steadied quickly. My name is Emily Carson, I said. You probably know me as the quiet daughter, the one who stayed in the shadows. But what you might not know is that I've been watching, learning, working quietly behind the scenes, sometimes with nothing more than a sketch pad and a prayer. I paused, meeting eyes across the room. Secretaries, assistants, architects, developers, accountants. For years, I saw how my father ran this place. Some of you were undervalued. Some of you were unheard. That ends now. Starting today, I want this company to reflect the people who make it thrive, not just the ones whose names are on the letterhead. A few heads nodded. Then a few hands clapped. Then the whole room joined in. I didn't need applause, but it meant something this time. Because it was earned. Later that afternoon, after the dust had started to settle, I found myself outside the Carson estate again. This time not for a party, not for another humiliation. But to finish something, I rang the bell. The door opened slowly, and there he was. My father? He looked older, tired, as though the weight of the last few days had settled hard on his shoulders. There were bags under his eyes and lines around his mouth that hadn't been there just a week ago. Emily? He said softly, "Can we talk?" He stepped aside. I walked in. The house was quiet, eerily so. No caterers, no guests, no echoing. Laughter from hollow conversations. Just silence and the scent of overwatered roses. We sat in his study, a room I was rarely invited into as a child. It was where the important conversations happened. The power decisions. The deals that shaped the future. He used to say, now I was the one shaping the future. I heard about the vote, he began. Congratulations, I nodded. Thanks. A pause. You earned it, he added, his voice lower now. I did, I replied. He glanced at me, something flickering in his eyes. You probably hate me. I leaned forward. I don't hate you, Dad. I've just stopped needing your approval. He flinched, but not in anger, in acceptance. That's fair, he whispered. I failed you, and not just you. I failed. Your grandfather's vision. I was so obsessed with power I forgot what it was for. Silence settled between us like dust in an abandoned room. I was angry for a long time, I admitted. But not just at you, at myself. For shrinking every time you dismissed me. For believing you when you said I was less than. He looked up slowly, eyes glassy. And now? Now I'm done shrinking, he nodded. I'm sorry. For everything. I studied him for a long moment. He looked like a man stripped of his armor. Just a father sitting across from his daughter, trying to figure out how to fix what years of pride had broken. I believe you're sorry, I said. But I don't need anything from you, not anymore. Not your inheritance, not your name. I'll make my own legacy, he smiled faintly. You already have. The days that followed were quiet but good quiet. Peaceful. Daniel reached out again. We had lunch, no photographers, no staged conversations. Just two siblings trying to rebuild a bridge that had long been burned. Lila? She stayed distant. Posting vague quotes about betrayal and people changing on her social media. That was fine. We all cope differently. And me? I rebranded the company. Not with flashy slogans, but with policies that mattered. Transparency, equal pay audits, mental health support, mentorship programs for women in leadership. Uncle Mark officially retired and handed me a small framed photo on his way out. It was a picture of me age 12 drawing at the corner of a Carson event while everyone else mingled. You've always stood apart, he said. Now you're standing above. Months passed, and one afternoon while sitting in a cafe with my sketchpad open, I saw a young girl watching me. Maybe 11, awkward, shy. Her mother called her name, but she stayed frozen. Staring at my drawings, I smiled and tilted my sketchpad toward her. Her eyes lit up. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just my story. It was hers, too, and every other person who had ever been told they were too quiet, too different, not enough. I'd been the black sheep. Now? I was the shepherd, the one leading a new path, and this time I wasn't alone, because the truth, once revealed, doesn't just set you free. It builds something stronger than approval. It builds respect. The end.